Everybody, we are now at Sour Belly Sink, and you need to get ready to hold on and maybe again have the lights on, because this is not a chapter you want to listen to in the dark. Right, Kat?
Come with me, my pretty.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. So this is going to be kind of interesting and fun, and we're going to come back and discuss what you've just experienced at the end of this chapter. Chapter 20. Jamison volunteered to take the lead. About a dozen stones were positioned between him and the island. They had looked at the stones and had reasoned if the water was deep, the stones would be pillars, with only their tops showing above the surface. They were large enough and flat enough that anyone would feel confident using them to cross the channel. The dark and murky water bubbled with gas. Decaying reeds lay rotting on the surface. Jamison thought the best course of action was to take it slow and easy. He didn't have any desire to fall into the oily sludge. He aimed for the first stone and took a long stride. As soon as his foot touched it, a cacophony of ear-piercing whistles, screeches, and squeals suddenly erupted from above. They hadn't noticed the birds until now, but perched in the highest branches of the onion trees were thousands of grackles. They flapped their wings and chattered with such intensity that even the swamp seemed to recoil with fear. Their sleek, black, iridescent bodies gleamed in the sun, giving them a purplish sheen. Their pendulous tails fluttered when they caught a breeze. They had long, pointed beaks that could easily spear a shellfish, break open a crust beetle, or gouge out an eye, which they had been known to do. They had black, penetrating eyes and astonishing vision. They could see small details from lengthy distances with amazing clarity. They had an uncanny ability to find whatever they were seeking, unless it was extremely well hidden. Grackles were mean and indomitable. They stole eggs from other birds' nests, tortured small animals, and never showed a hint of hesitation when encountering a venomous snake. A single angry grackle was a terrible menace. Tens of thousands of them could conquer an army. Once they set their mind on a task, they were tenacious and wouldn't stop until they reached their goal. Calixta had taken control of this flock by placing them under a spell of servitude. She was the one who set their goals. Whatever she commanded them to do, they did, and they did it with full resolve. Jamison was so startled by the sudden outbreak of screeching grackles that he nearly lost his balance. He managed to regain control and jump back onto the land. Once Jamison was back on the path, the deafening squills subsided. "They're watching us," Euna said with confidence. "These grackles must be her guards, or her eyes, or both. They are certainly focused on us." Euna was right. They were watching their visitors with great interest. Only occasionally did a grackle flit from one branch to another. The noise coming from the treetops became a low murmur as the grackles gibbered and clacked. "Maybe it was a coincidence," suggested Nelson. "Do you think I should try again?" asked Jamison. "I'll take a chance this time. Step back. Let me try," offered Nelson. He slipped to the front and looked to the first stone. As he did, a large bubble formed several yards away. It burped and broke the scum-covered surface. "Did you see that?" asked Euna. "See what?" he asked. Nelson looked to where Euna was pointing and saw the remains of thick ripples dissipating as they expanded across the surface of the lake. Then it hit them, a stench so sickening that they all grabbed their noses and covered their mouths. It was too late for Nelson. His stomach churned and he fell to his knees, vomiting into the lake. He heaved 2 more times before he finally began to recover. Within a few minutes, the hideous odor had wafted away. "Rest, Nelson," said Jamison. "I'll go." Jamison once again launched onto the first stepping stone. As he did, the treetops exploded with shrieking and clattering. This time the grackles lit off their perches, and the tops of the trees seethed with angry birds. Jamison wasn't startled, so he held his position. As he advanced to the next stone, the grackles became more agitated and their volume intensified. They flew around the tops of the trees, but they were keeping their distance. Jamison had advanced to the third stone when Euna caught movement in her periphery. She saw a disturbance on the surface of the lake. It was coming from the same place that the bubble had burst. Nelson saw it too. A large, tubular-shaped hump broke the surface, skimmed through the slime, and then slithered downward until it was submerged again. "Jamison! There's something under the water!" Euna shouted. "On your right," Nelson called. "Look to your right." Jamison heard the sound of their voices calling to him, but he couldn't make out what they were saying. The shrilling pandemonium was so loud that he could barely think. "I'm okay," he shouted. "I'm going on." They couldn't hear him either. Above them, the entire flock had assembled into a swirling vortex. This caused Jamison to panic, and he began leaping from stone to stone. He made it to 5 more stones before the grackles sat upon him. He flailed his arms in an attempt to fend off their attack, but his effort was futile. Euna and Nelson watched in horror as he toppled from the stone and fell into the murky lake. As soon as he was in the water, the birds stopped their attack, formed a tight formation, and soared upward. Their mass darkened the sky and cast a cloudy shadow down over the swamp. They flew heavenward, morphing from one triumphant formation to the next. They had stopped shrieking. Jamison flailed in the rancid water and finally caught hold of one of the stones. He was coming to his senses when he heard his name being called. It was Nelson and Euna shouting to him. Their voices were full of panic and distress. "Get out, Jamison! Get out! Swim to the shore! Hurry! It's a swamp dragon! Hurry!" Jamison wiped slimy scum off his eyes so that he could see and get his bearings. "Jamison, hurry! Come this way!" Jamison saw a spiny gray hump moving through the water. Its undulating mass slithered through the mire. The creature's neck began to materialize above the surface. In an instant, its massive, fang-mouthed head lurched out of the depths. Its nostrils exploded with a force so strong that water spewed to where Nelson and Euna were standing. Its red eyes blazed with fiery rage, and a foamy slime oozed from its gaping mouth. The dragon released a gurgling roar as it launched itself into the air, completely breaching the surface, dove into the lake, and disappeared. The swamp dragon's movement created an obvious turbulence on the surface as it headed in Jamison's direction. Jamison began swimming toward the shore as fast as he could. He flailed at the water in panic. Euna and Nelson watched in disbelief, helplessly screaming for him to hurry. Jamison knew that the swamp dragon would be on him in an instant, and he would be devoured in seconds. He almost gave up. In his panic, he felt his foot touch the bottom of the lake. He hadn't realized the water was this shallow. He began to run and paddle to the shore, fighting his way through the decaying muck. Euna and Nelson fought to pull him on shore just as the swamp dragon was about to reach him. They all scrambled to get as far away as possible. The swamp dragon thrashed in the shallows and snorted another repulsive spray, drenching all of them, causing them to retreat further down the path. As soon as they felt safe, they stopped to catch their breath. "Jamison, you're bleeding." Euna held his chin, turning his face to one side and then the other, checking his wounds. The grackles had managed to slice his face in several places. His hands were also bleeding from trying to fend them off. Euna used Nelson's knife to cut off the lower part of her tunic. She compressed the wounds to stop the bleeding and cleaned them the best she could with water from her canteen. She knew Jamison would be fine, but he was going to hurt for a few days. "Now what?" asked Nelson. "I have a note to deliver," insisted Euna. "Nelson, I want you to stay here with Jamison. Do not follow me. Promise?" Nelson agreed to stay, although he tried desperately to persuade Euna not to go back to the lake on her own. She vowed not to attempt the stepping stones and swore to avoid anything that might seem foolish. The lake was eerily quiet. The grackles had returned to their roosts, and there was no sign of the swamp dragon. The only thing that broke the silence was the dull plopping of thick, gaseous burbles. "Calixta!" Euna called out. "I'm here with a note from Queen Beatrice." Her voice reverberated across the lake and lingered in the distance. There was no response, but she hadn't expected one. Euna examined the island. It was bleak and repulsive, a hideous, crusty scab festering on the lake. At first glance, the tower on the top of the heaping rock gave the appearance that it had long been abandoned. Spiderweb moss dangled from rocks that protruded from the wall. Partway up, Picklevine had taken a foothold in the cracks. It snaked its way up the tower where it became a thorny, lacy crown encircling the rim. Euna knew that the Picklevine would have taken over the entire tower if it had been left alone. Someone was removing Picklevine from around the bottom of the tower. It most certainly had not been abandoned. "Calixta!" Euna called out again. Still nothing. Euna sat down and tried to think of anything else she could do. She thought about leaving the note where Calixta could find it, but she feared that it would end up in the lake. She pulled her knees close to her chest, made a pillow with her arms, and rested her head. She stayed this way for a long time and nearly dozed off. A gravelly squawk broke the silence. Euna looked up and saw a magnificent raven circling the tower. It gracefully spiraled upward and then glided across to the edge of the lake, where it flew around the entire perimeter before returning to the tower. It perched on a thick, woody, pricklevine trunk and squawked again. Euna stood up and called out to the raven, waving the note high in the air. "I have a note for Calixta." The raven stood up and extended its wings. It then launched from the tower and glided directly toward her. She wasn't sure if the raven was planning to attack, but she decided to stand her ground and do what she could at the last minute if necessary. The raven slowed and softly landed directly in front of her. "Give me the note," commanded the raven. He was direct and to the point, but his tone wasn't forceful or threatening. "The note is for Calixta," replied Euna. "She will not see you. She instructed me to bring the note to her." "Who are you? What's your name?" demanded Euna. She was not about to tell the queen that she had given the note to an anonymous raven. "My name is Omen. I serve Calixta." Euna studied him for a moment. She was willing to give the note to a courier, but she was apprehensive about doing so without some form of proof. "I'm Euna. I'm the queen's chamber nurse," she said, reaching into her pocket. "I'll only give this note to you if you allow me to take a picto of you holding it. I want proof that I gave it to you." Omen was reluctant, but he knew that he and Euna were only doing as they were commanded. Calixta wanted the note. If having his picture taken was a requirement, then he would allow it. "Very well," said Omen. "I agree." When Euna handed Omen the note, she didn't let go. She looked into his eyes and perceived an emptiness that caused her to feel pity for him. She also noticed an undercurrent of gentleness that she admired. She finally let go of the note. She took the picto of Omen holding the note with Calixta's tower in the background and thanked him. Omen flew back to the tower and Euna rejoined Jamison and Nelson.
Oh my gosh, we just met Omen, which the name alone is fantastic and should, alert the reader. But what a wonderfully creepy place this is. That is so much fun.
Bubbly, gaseous, a stench that's so bad that it makes him throw up. And you're right about Omen. Now, I will let the readers know because I want them to know backstories and secrets. Omen he's been in the story for a long time, but he was going to be with another bird named Menace. We had Omen and Menace. Well, Menace never really made it into the story, or at least not yet. And so Omen is in the story, serving Calixta, who we did not get to see here. But nonetheless, he did come in. And oh my gosh, just the scene in the swamp with the swamp dragon and the grackles. I mean, the grackles, we now know how severe they are, that they can do some significant damage.
Absolutely. And then Miss Euna comes in and saves the day. Love her.
Yeah. Well, she says, I'm going to do what Beatrice has told me to do. I have to deliver this note one way or the other. And then it's like, I'm going to have proof. So we have to have a photo made. And they do their, of course, they do their photo. I had fun working with this chapter, and this is a little bit of again, it's all teasing because that was the first time we had kind of darkness. I mean, when the grackles came the first time, that was spooky, but this is the second time that we've really kind of moved into something that was dark. And so it's not always sugar cane and sugar plums and all that.
Well, yes, indeed, but there's always going to be more things that will definitely spark interest and curiosity, but and make you scared.
All right, well, we'll be back.